Welcome everyone. Good morning. Thanks for making the time to join us. We will start shortly. But before we do, I'd like to mention that we'll be recording the session and you'll receive a copy of the recording by email soon, 1 or 2 days after today. So the recording will also be made available on the SimaPro Help Center, support.simapro.com, in a couple of days. Maybe good for you to know that all attendees are muted. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box and we'll be sure to handle them either immediately or at the end in the Q&A session. So thanks again for joining. I'm Ruba. I'm the Senior Customer Service Specialist at PRE and I'll be facilitating this session. Joining me is Marisa Vieira. She's the Principal Consultant at PRE, where she leads the consultancy team, and her areas of expertise include environmental product performance, sustainability metrics, and sustainability strategy. But Marisa has also been involved in the PEF since its inception in 2011, so yes, goes back a long way. So welcome. Hi. Marisa.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from.
And also joining us is one of the newest members to join the PRE team is Sineuve. And she'll be giving a demonstration a little later in the session. So Sineuve is studying environmental science at Advanced Hogeschool and has joined PRE as part of a 4-month internship. And for her final thesis, she's looking to create a reusable PEF model on bottled water by integrating SimaPro Flow, Collect and Share. And this is basically what she will be showing a part of later in this session.
Hello.
So before I switch things over to Marisa, I'd like to briefly introduce PRE as well. To those of you who don't know us, we put the metrics behind sustainability. One way we do that is by developing SimaPro, for example. But PRE also plays an active role in a variety of projects and initiatives, such as, for example, the PEF, the Social Roundtable, and development of impact assessment methods and such. So thanks again for being part of our large SimaPro family, which reaches more than 3,000 users via not only PRE but our partner network. And it's also interesting to note that SimaPro was used by the majority of the pilots in the EF pilot phase. A few highlights from our PEF experience. So we were involved in a variety of areas, but maybe interesting to know that we were the help desk of the EF pilot phase. We coordinated the remodeling consortium, which remodeled the benchmarks, and we were also involved in the development of the EF compliant secondary data, which we'll tell you more about later in this session. And based on PRE's involvement the last years and expertise in the PEF, we have a new training in our assortment, and it's basically a hands-on training. Where you can learn a bunch of things, for example, how to determine which data you need to collect, where to get it from, how to identify the most relevant items of your life cycle, how to apply the circular footprint formula and end of life in SimaPro. So it's really hands-on, and we already have the first session next week, but we'll be scheduling more sessions in the future, so stay tuned for that. And finally, a little bit of what you can expect the next hour. So Marisa will walk us through the environmental footprint pilot phase and the outcomes thereof, and then move on to the transition phase and the outlook in terms of policy development. And we'll spend a lot of time also talking about the SimaPro-related developments, including the demo that Sineuve will show at the end. So that's it from me. I'll pass it on to Marisa. I took enough time, I think.
So thank you, Ruba. Well, for those of you who have been already joining previous webinars on this subject, some of the information I will start with might not be new, but this is so that everyone is on board from the start and is aware of what is this environmental footprint initiative. So first I will be telling you a little bit about what happened during the pilot phase. And then we'll move on into the next steps. So if you look at what are the environmental labels available in the world, there are more than 460. So this is quite a lot, and it really raises a lot of questions. So what is green? How do I prove that my company or product is green? If I choose one approach, will that be accepted by everyone? And do I have to prove that I'm green in different ways to different customers, so using the different labels? And will consumers and businesses trust and understand the claims that I make? So this was quite, challenging as such. So the European Commission thought we have the role of at least harmonizing the way it's done within the European Union. So in 2013, they published a Commission recommendation in which they recommend two methods, one at product life cycle and one at organizational value chain level. So the product environmental footprint and the organization environmental footprint methods, they are compatible, consistent within each other, but they have different scopes. One is the product, the other one is the organization. And in that recommendation as well, they announced a pilot phase. And that pilot phase was meant to develop specific rules for products and for organizations, and doing that through a multi-stakeholder process. So zooming into the pilot phase, it started in 2014 and it ran up to April 2018. And the main goal of the pilot phase was to establish and validate the development process of the so-called product environmental footprint category rules and organization environmental footprint sector rules. With this, I mean that if you look at a specific product group, for instance, dairy products, you will be establishing the specific rules that apply for assessing the environmental footprint of dairy products. So you really make it customized to that product group. So it was quite a long journey, the pilot phase, and the lessons that were learned and all the developments that occurred during the pilot phase have been published recently. So last month, there were two separate JRC reports, one on suggestions for updating the PEF method and another one on the suggestions for updating the OEF method. So this is already taking into account the learnings that have been achieved during the pilot phase. And why actually did companies and organizations come on board to develop a PEF-CR? Well, first of all, it shows clear commitment to sustainability because you are investing on setting up the rules for environmental sustainability assessment. Second, it creates a level playing field for the entire sector or product category. And of course, from the moment you can compare the results of your own products or your own product portfolio to the benchmark, you can show that you have possibly a competitive advantage compared to substitutes. Another thing is, since this is at the moment still an exercise, but planned to be possibly used in regulations or in policies in the future, if you develop a PEF-CR in the scope of the pilot phase or what will start after, you might have an active role in influencing for what is to come. And of course, also the information coming out of these can be used for things like labels, certification schemes, EPDs, and communication vehicles. And I will tell you later a bit more on what the expectations might be with regards to applications. So very shortly, a few highlights on what a PEF-CR includes. So what a product environmental footprint category rules includes. Well, it includes a list of the products to be covered in that PEF-CR. It includes the list of the so-called most relevant impact categories, life cycle stages, and processes. So from the entire life cycle, a few are highlighted, which are responsible for, let's say, the largest part of the environmental performance. So that's the list I'm referring to. Each PEF-CR also includes the environmental profile of the average European product. This is also what we have been modeling in the remodeling consortium that Huber referred to earlier. And this constitutes then the benchmark. So the benchmark results of the average European product for each PEF-CR. The PEF-CR also lists the mandatory company-specific data that must be collected for a specific product. It includes the list of the default secondary data sets to be used. It lists the data quality and the verification requirements. And of course, the modeling rules to model all of these, but these are just a few highlights. So moving very quickly already on what were the main deliverables of the pilot phase. Well, like I said, there's now a clear guidance on how to develop PEF-CRs and OEF-SRs. This is what has been published in the JRC reports. There are altogether about 70 models that have been used to define the benchmark, and these will be available for free to any user by the European Commission later on when these have been approved. There are about 5,000 available secondary EF datasets, so EF compliant lifecycle inventory datasets. And there are 19 PEF-CRs that have been approved and 2 OEF-SRs. So here you can see the list of those who participated and completed the development of the PEF-CRs and OEF-SRs during the pilot phase. For the moment, all of them are already available on the Commission's website. Metal Sheets is waiting for publication, but this has also been approved during the pilot phase. They are just finishing off a few things. So you can see it's quite comprehensive. It includes intermediate products, so products that are meant for more business to business. It includes consumer products, so for B2C. It has food products, it has IT products, so it's quite diverse. And for the sectors, it has been implemented for the retail sector and the copper production sector. So this was it when it comes to the pilot phase. And now what everyone is asking itself is, now that the environmental footprint pilot phase has ended, what's next? And what's next is what the Commission now calls the transition phase. And why is it called transition phase? Because they say this is the period in between the completion of the pilot phase and the period when they expect that there will be some policies in place which already integrate PEF and OEF methods. So the transition phase has officially started, and the aim is to monitor the voluntary implementation of the already, finalized PEF-CRs and OEF-SRs, the development of new ones, and some further methodological improvements which are on the agenda for the transition phase. So the Commission has published on March 7th the call for volunteers to participate in the EF transition phase, and this will be closed by June 7th. So for those of you who are interested, there's work to be done because there's also all kinds of documents and information that you need to fill in and provide when you submit an application to the European Commission. So possibilities to participate, this actually goes beyond the list that the Commission provides in the call for applications. Of course, you can test and approve PEF-CR by making your own PEF study. You can become an official PEF or EF pilot in the transition phase, so I shouldn't be calling it pilot anymore, but project in the transition phase. But we also would like to warn you for some other things which are not really, provided as, options by the European Commission, but that we already see occurring. If you are a supply chain partner, you are very likely to be asked for data because maybe some PEF-CRs prescribe company-specific data for, packaging materials, for instance. I also know that there are a number of branch organizations which are interested in developing themselves EF compliant secondary data, so this is also a possibility for you to act. If either you are not selected as an official PEF project for the transition phase, or that is not what you would like to do, but you would still like to develop one, then there's also an option of doing it outside of the formal, let's say, route of the European Commission, but in parallel with that, and that has become known as shadow PEF-CRs or EFSRs. Yeah, you can conduct a study using the general guidance, so for something which still doesn't have a specific PEF-CR or EFSR. And what we also see is that for those who participated in the transition phase, there is an increasing need for developing a specific tool to calculate their PEF and OEF studies. And this is just because PEF-CR, the model and the data is, you know, a good start, but then they want to make it applicable and directly usable by making it all used in a tool. So a few outlooks in terms of policy development, because this is of course what everyone is asking itself already. So what are then those policies that are likely to come? Well, one that is already very concrete and in action is the EN 15804 standard. So that is the standard for producing environmental product declarations for construction products. And this is currently being revised. And this is being mainly revised to align with many of the PEF rules. So for instance, just to name a few, the modeling of the material and energy recovery will be done according to the circular footprint formula. So that becomes the end of life formula applicable in the, well, according to the EN 15804. The EF method becomes also the impact assessment becomes the method that has been used in the environmental footprint also. So as you see in the image on the left, there are 16 different impact categories. So this is different from what has been used so far. And there are several life cycle stages that become mandatory to report. And up to now, when you did an EPD according to the EN 15804, you could do cradle to gate, but this is no longer possible. So this is still on draft and it's going for vote on April 25th, but I'm just giving you an early warning because you can expect that if you are active in the construction sector, you might need to adapt to this, yeah, and change the way you're doing. So looking more on the, well, possible policy applications that are coming from the European Commission. They have announced also on March 7th, when they released the call for volunteers for the transition phase, they said, well, when it comes to revision or use of PEF and OEF methods in existing policies, we can expect the following. So at product level, so using PEF method, we can expect that might be used for the development of criteria for EU eco-label, for the green public procurement, and for eco-design, and also for R&D funds. So this action will provide support through relevant funding programs like LIFE or Horizon, where in the scope of those projects, they will have to develop EF compliant life cycle inventory data. So this is what you might expect in terms of the applicability of the PEF method. At corporate level, so using the OEF method, one concrete possibility is for non-financial disclosure in the context of the Sustainable Finance Action Plan, and this has been adopted in 2018. And another one is, of course, in the scope of the ISO 14001 or the EMAS hotspot analysis to identify direct and indirect environmental impacts.
Marisa, there was one question regarding the EN 15804. If the revision has been aligned or was working with the project on PEF for building. Is it connected in some way?
Good question. I expect that it is to some extent, because I also know that the environmental footprint team of the European Commission was, you know, collaborating with SEN to make these amendments. And of course, they were the contractor of the PEF for buildings project. So I'm sure that the insights provided in that project have been taken into account. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So moving on, when it comes to SimaPro, because all of this was a bit of the journey of the EF initiative, but now we would like to provide you some insights in how we made SimaPro fully EF compliant. So one thing that we will soon provide is the separate download of an EF database, and the version 2.0, which we will then release when we get a green light from the European Commission, is compatible with all PEF-CRs and OEFSRs that have been approved during the pilot phase. And what will this include? It will include all secondary EF compliant datasets and ILCD compliant datasets that have been used in the benchmark models. It will include the EF impact assessment method, so the compatible method that you must use for the assessment. And as an add-on in SimaPro, just to ease your life, we'll also deliver packaging waste scenarios for all EU countries, which are modeled with the circular footprint formula. And we do this because we know how complicated it can be to implement it, so we just want to facilitate the life of our users by providing this to them.
Is secondary data generic data?
Yes, yes. So you might expect, this is the timeline I got from the Commission in spring 2019, and I'm aware that spring already started, so you never know if it will actually be the case, but this is what I have been informed. But as soon as we get a green light from the European Commission that we can release it in our own software, we will, of course, inform via our communications vehicles. Just an important note, this data is only for free if used in PEF or OEF studies that are implementing PEF-CRs or OEFSRs developed during the pilot phase. So if you are not using it for this purpose, you will need to purchase the data with the data providers. But again, when we release the data, we will also provide more information about how this can be done and who the data providers are. So what else have we done in SimaPro? We have implemented the impact assessment method that was used during the pilot phase. So this has been released in the SimaPro 9.0 release that went out a few weeks ago. It is a method that includes, like I mentioned earlier, 16 impact categories. The characterization is at midpoint. It has global, normal, characterization factor, and normalization factors, and panel weighting. And you can use this with data from any other library, because we are aware that you might not want to have a fully PEF compliant study and yet still use this method. So this is what this is meant for. You can now use the method with any other data.
Marisa, there was a question regarding this new impact assessment method. Does it include land use change?
Yes, yes, but only direct, not indirect land use change.
Okay.
So other SimaPro related developments with regards to the EF initiative, for the transition phase, there will be a new version of the data and of the method that will become available. So as soon as these are available, we will also implement it in SimaPro and make it available with the terms and conditions applicable to these. So this is upcoming, but since this data didn't start to be developed yet, you might expect it possibly next year, not earlier.
There's an additional question regarding the method, that it does not at this moment include weighting. Do you have any idea?
It does. It does? It does. Yeah, it includes panel weighting. Yeah, so you can also calculate single score, but the single score is in principle only meant to be used for the identification of the most relevant impact categories. Once that has been done, results should be displayed at characterization level, but this is already, weighting is already available.
Yes.
So moving on, so for those of you who are SimaPro users, you have probably been using SimaPro desktop, so our traditional method for many years, but we are extending our product portfolio by adding a few web-based solutions, and one of them is called Share. And Share is essentially a scenario tool which you can use, And you can use it in the scope of PEF, of course, to compare the PEF results of your own company with those of the benchmark, so the average European product. And how is that essentially done? You have a model, and the model contains, of course, all the information from, the benchmark. So it has all the default values that have been used for the modeling of the average European product. But then each individual user at their own site, web-based, can access that model by filling in their company-specific data, and then they will get their company-specific results, and they can also compare those with the benchmark. So this is what Sinova will be showing shortly, but this is just a heads up for what we are going to show and how does it relate to the topic of this webinar. Just a moment now, because now we'll switch to share. Where do you want to start? This one?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to try to make it short because there are many things on the SimaPro online that can be shown, and many details which are not relevant in this situation. But I'm going to focus on the most interesting and important things to know for the share scenarios, which Marisa just explained a little bit about. Just to start, the SimaPro online platform is a toolkit with 3 tools at the moment. So there is one tool called Collect, one called Share, and then we have Flow. Flow is the main part, which is basically where the modeling is happening, where you have an overview of the processes, the parameters, and then you have the canvas, which we see on the screen, and you can show the Sankey. On top of this, you have the collect and share. I'm not going into detail to the collect, but it's a way of making data collection forms which are connected with your model, so with your flow model. On the other hand, you have share, which is a tool to create comparisons or make eco-design easier. And as you will see afterwards, it's quite easy to use, even if you have not created an LCA before. But both collect and share use calculations and data from the flow model, which is created by the expert. So another important thing to have in mind on the online platform is that there are 2 sides to the platform. There is a business user side and there is an expert side. So they have different logins and see different things on the platform. The business user is the expert user is the person who is making and creating the LCA, connecting them to collect and share, and creates the collect and share parts. While the business user only sees what the expert wants the business user to see. So if the experts want the business user to see only the collection form where they have to fill in the data, then the business user only sees that part. If the expert wants the business user to see the share project, then that's what they see. So for this demo, I modeled the European average beer on the basis of the information which is given in the PEF-CR for beer. So on the canvas, you can see the model for the benchmark beer. And here with the Sankey, you can identify the hotspots. So raw material acquisition is a large one, and also the use phase. You can also drill down and see further where does the raw material acquisition and pre-processing get the emission from. And you see here the packaging is the largest impact here. And that you can do with all of these, and even all the way down to the basic processes or secondary data that you use. Yes, so let's go to the share. I'm going to show you the user part to start with. So this is what a business user would see. And as you see, the expert already have two scenarios, which is shown on the left side. The expert also put in several hotspots, so bottle material, cap material, manufacturing, and end of life. And if you open them, you can see what you can fill in. So let's try to make a new scenario. You click add new scenario, it will pop up here, and I will make a plastic bottle. So I fill in the title, plastic bottle, and you send description to make it more specific. And then if you open the first here, you can start with, okay, we want a PET 15 grams per bottle. These are the numbers which are from the baseline, so they look a bit large, or not large, but with the commas. Let's see.
High level of accuracy from SimaPro, I think.
Exactly.
Exported. Yeah.
And then you have to save. So then we see the bottle material only have 15 grams of PET plastic. And if we go further, we can go to the cap material. I will put in 2 grams of HDPE plastic and 0 on steel, because there is nothing. And then you can go further on. I will make it the same as the glass bottle. So I will fill in 10 kilowatt hours of electricity, Poland. And then also for the wastewater, I see that these are the same numbers as this one, so I don't have to change anything, but then 150 kilograms of wastewater instead. So then I fill in 150 kilograms. See, and then, yeah, these are the benchmark country for the end of life, so I will keep it like that. You merely click the calculate scenario, and on the side it will show the calculations.
There's a question, if you can fill the form automatically for many products. So I think if you can create multiple scenarios in one.
Yes, you can create as many scenarios as you want, but it is not possible to do them in one go. So you have to create a scenario, fill it in, and then create a new one for the next product.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't want to show for this one, but I haven't had that error before, but yeah, it will show similar to each of the categories for the EF method. Yeah, and it's set for 100 kilograms of beer. Yeah, as you see, it's very easy to use, and this is seen from a business user, of course, and there are many details in the back which the expert can make use of. This tool can also be used for different things, such as benchmarking your own product, and also comparing to the benchmark, as Marisa said, also monitoring each year, and so on. So
And there's a question if it can be used, for example, share, it can be used on more complicated scenarios on whole life cycles.
Yes, it can be.
Okay.
It can also, if it's many data that you want to fill in, I would recommend to use the collect part, which is similar, but then you just fill in the data and get the calculations through the platform. So yeah.
And in the example you showed, can you specify which plastic is used in the bottle, for instance, more than PET? So can you provide more variations, more options?
Yes, that's definitely possible.
That's something that the expert user usually defines, right? The parameters and
Yes.
the ranges of what the business user can
Yes.
play around with. Yeah.
That's correct.
Shall I take over again?
Yeah. Yeah, there are a bunch of questions, but then we can, not specifically to the demo, so we can handle them later.
Yeah, so as you could see, although it didn't run as perfectly as we would have wished for, Share allows you to very easily, without previous LCA knowledge, if you are, for instance, an operations manager, you know exactly how much electricity is used, how much heat is used, so all you fill in is the data values, and then you get the impact assessment results out, and you can compare it indeed to any previous scenario that has been modeled and with the benchmark or with the baseline scenario. So in fact, with such a tool, and we developed, of course, because there was a market demand for it, we are actually moving away from static reports. So up until now, LCA was always done on a project level. So you started the model from scratch each time again. It was also very costly. It took quite a lot of time. And with Share, you now see it can become dynamic and flexible. You don't need to have as many LCA knowledge as, you know, an LCA expert. I have continuous interaction because it's a web-based version that already links with the expert side of the model, like Sinova has demonstrated. And with this, you can finally meet large-scale applications. So with that, we come to the end of our presentation, and we would be happy to take any question from you now, and Ruba will be helping select.
Yes, there are a number of questions, so we'll do our best to answer everything. If not, then we will get back to you by email after the session. So please keep typing away, and we'll address as many as possible. So start with the more simple questions, maybe. If the collect and share platform is included in the basic price of SimaPro, is there a limit to the number of models a SimaPro user can share with customers, for example? Such questions. So if you have an indefinite, if you have a SimaPro license, indeed, if it's a business license, so that is one of our expert or power user packages. For every SimaPro user, you get indeed one expert user access on the platform. That's already included. So if you have an indefinite license, it's included in the SimaPro service contract. And if you have a temporary license, then it's just part of the package as well. And every expert can also invite one business user, and you can invite 30 people to answer your survey. So at the moment, this is out of the box, and this is available to all customers with a SimaPro license, professional license. So I'm afraid it's not yet available for educational purposes. And if there's another question, if colleagues, for example, who are not familiar with using SimaPro or don't have access to SimaPro, can they be invited to use Share or collect to answer surveys?
Yes, that can be done.
Yes, that's actually one of the main goals in order to facilitate the use of LCA results. Let's say if you're not familiar with modeling yourself and stuff, but you can still benefit from the value of LCA. Another question for Marisa: if all PFCR baseline products are implemented in SimaPro?
Yeah, not yet. We plan to as soon as the Commission release it. They're still approving the benchmark models from the remodeling project, so we will have to wait for that, and then we plan to make it available in SimaPro. Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned how the EN 15804 is being revised, and there will be a vote. Who is eligible to vote? Can people vote? Somebody's asked they would like to vote, for example. Is that possible?
No, what I think is that it's being voted via this group of people who represent each EU member state and are affiliated with the SEN. So if I'm not mistaken, every country gets a vote, and then the country can itself coordinate with the people involved and contributing to development of the standard, what the overall position of the country is, and that's the vote. I don't think it can be just done by any.
It's all public.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you have any more information on how to apply, for example, for a pilot, an official or?
Yeah, we can deliver that information possibly afterwards via email, but there is in the Commission's website all information and a set of documents that are needed to fill in for the application procedure.
Okay. Just try to filter some of the questions. Did you consider the impact of beer production in the example you made with bottles, or is just the impact of the packaging system?
No, it's the whole flow model, which I showed you, that is in the background of the share project. So everything is included. It's a full PEF model, so it includes everything from beer or grain production until the end of life with the carbon footprint formula.
Yeah, so it's the complete value chain, but the only variables that were available in this case for the demo were those 4 items, but the complete value chain is included.
And like the different hotspots, the different variables can be chosen by the expert in the background.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go up some earlier questions. While you were talking about the circular footprint method, could you repeat which standard this refers to? Was there a standard mentioned?
The environmental footprint.
The circular footprint method.
Oh, yeah. So the circular footprint formula.
Sorry.
That is those are the specific modeling rules that apply for end-of-life processes. So when you use recycled content, when you send something to recycling, incineration, there are specific rules according to the circular footprint formula that must be applied. And this is actually one of the sections of the, new PEF and OEF method, and also the PEFCR and OEFSR guidance. So this is what has been developed in the scope of the pilot phase and is valid for PEF and OEF purposes.
Okay. And another question, I think similar to how there's now alignment with the EN 1504, how does that align with the EU eco-label? For example, will existing label criteria be adjusted to PEF, or will there new products be covered? I don't know if you have
this is one of the considerations that the Commission has presented on March 7th. So they say that one likely use of PEF methods and of these hotspots identification is to use it for the development of eco-label and eco-design and green public procurement criteria. And one specific case, it might be interesting just to know, actually for the development of the eco-design criteria for solar panels, the output of the PEFCR has already been used for redefining the eco-design criteria for PV panels.
Okay. And we do have a number of questions regarding to the EF impact assessment method. If it includes updated toxicity factors based on U stocks or the latest U stocks?
Yeah, so the recent release by the European Commission, I also think 1 month ago, is not available in the version 2.0 because the version 2.0 was frozen during the pilot phase to be used in relation to developments of the pilot phase. So that is still using that version applicable for the pilot phase. However, like I said, it is on our pipeline to implement the most recent released by the European Commission of the toxicity impact categories, but that will be in one overall release when the complete EFIA method for the transition phase is available.
And another question about, well, one of the users is asking, they have a SimaPro multi-user version. Do they have to pay an additional fee to access the EF database? Maybe you can recap who is eligible.
Yeah, so if you are using it for, let's say, an official PEF or OEF studies, which is implementing any of those PFCRs and OEFSRs that I've showed in one of the slides, then you are eligible to use it for free. If not, then you're not. And then if you still have an interest in using this data, I'm afraid you will need to purchase it with the data providers, like I said, because it's still their property, although the Commission has used it for the purpose of the, let's say, pilot phase. But like I said, we'll publish, when we get a green light, a dedicated web page to the EF database, and we'll also provide more information about what is then eligible for free use and what not, and in that case, what do you do if you would still like to access that data? Okay. While Ruba is still screening through the questions, I will just say you're always welcome to send me an email. I'm in the lead when it comes to PEF at PRAE, so please reach out if you don't have the chance to ask her questions now, or if you want to think before you do.
Is there any support from the Commission for companies interested to contributing to the transition phase topics?
Yes, there is, but there is only for those who then submit an official application by no later than June 7th. And out of those that will submit this application, the Commission will select a maximum of 12. And for those 12, well, they take formal participation into the transition phase, and for some of them, so a subset of them, 6 to 8, the Commission will, for instance, guarantee that they buy the necessary secondary data. They will facilitate the meetings of these groups who are developing the PFCRs. But that is also information which is available in this website of the Commission that has more information with regards to the call for volunteers for the transition phase.
Okay, thank you. And there's another question, if there are webinars planned for using collect, flow, and share in the most effective way. Well, we are planning, well, we've started already on a series of webinars regarding specific applications, because as you see with the platform, you can use it in various ways. So we are planning sessions based on different applications. So for example, next week, we have an exclusive webinar for our SimaPro users with an active license or service contract, and it's regarding how do you create EPDs using SimaPro. And there we will show it in the desktop version as well as on the platform. So just to give you an idea, there are more things coming in the planning, and it will be more application related indeed. And there's another question, if you can repeat how the benchmark profile is done. I'm not sure if they would like to see it again, but did you build it maybe from scratch in SimaPro Flow, or did you, for example, you can already, there are two ways you can work with the canvas. You can either export a model if you've already had it in SimaPro, or you can start from scratch in Flow. And maybe an idea on how you tackled this.
Yeah, it was developed on basis of the information provided in the PEF-CR of beer. So in the PEF-CR of beer, it is stated what were the secondary data sets used throughout the entire life cycle of the beer product. So that has been plugged in then on the background of the model. It also includes information about the market data. So how many of it was lager beer, how many was stout beer, how many. So this is what was used as well. And also for the packaging materials, it also had, you know, a contribution in terms of percentage of all the different packaging materials. So all this information was used to kind of rebuild the benchmark model, and this is also what we made available through Flow to the business user also in Share.
Okay. And so going back to the PEF-CRs, this one particularly about metal sheets, does it provide guidance on the end of life scenario to be chosen, cutoff or open loop?
Yes, it's neither cutoff nor open loop. It is what I referred to earlier, the circular footprint formula. Yeah, so actually this is not, you know, pilot dependent. This is one single formula that must be used in the scope of the EF initiative. So all pilots, all PEF-CRs and OEFSRs must use this single formula for modeling.
And I'll just read out the next question. So you said it's possible to conduct a study using the general PEF guidance. So can the EF dataset be used for that also, or only for studies according to the PEF-CR?
Yeah, they cannot be used for free. So you might still want to use the EF compliant datasets for that purpose, but then you are not entitled to use them for free. Mm-hmm. Because that's only with PEF and OEF studies following approved PEF-CRs or OEFSRs. I hope this is not my battery.
Well, I can switch to my just in case.
It is my battery. Yeah, that's when you think that person is an amateur who goes without battery to start a webinar. I have another 5 minutes and we have another 8 for the webinar, so we should be fine.
Yes, so let me just check them. So a few more questions and then we can actually wrap it up. Could you comment on how small companies are supposed to profit from doing LCAs, develop EPDs, which is already hard, and now dealing with PEFs, it's not really making things easier for them? But that's the idea, that's the opinion here.
Yeah.
What would you suggest?
No, it's a good question. The Commission also explicitly wanted SMEs to become involved also during the pilot phase, but now it's actually even a requirement to develop new PEF-CRs and OEFSRs to involve at least one SME in the group of companies. And one of the purposes of PEF is to do all this work so that later on it actually becomes more actionable and easier and simpler to do it. And as you could see by Synovis' presentation, it can be quite straightforward to do such a calculation, just if you are asked to fill in the company's specific data. So I really think that we are moving again from this static, very costly LCA reports and LCA studies to more mainstream applications. Of course, companies still need to get up to speed, so there's some level of investment required also when it comes to capacity development if they want to do it themselves. But I think that it's much less compared to, let's say, more traditional LCA practice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another question is the slides will be shared. Well, we will share indeed a recording of this webinar, either by email or if you visit the SimaPro Help Center at support.simapro.com, then you'll find the session in a few days. So with that, I'd like to wrap it up here. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to answer all your questions, but some things will require, I think, a lengthy answer by email. So either myself, Sineva, or Marisa will get back to you in the coming days. Please stay tuned for upcoming webinars, especially on the applications. Like I mentioned, these are exclusive to our SimaPro users. So you will get an invitation by email. If you don't, please bug us about it. So thanks again for joining, for making the time, and you'll hear from us regarding the recording and
Thank you
follow-up.
all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.